The village of Evershade was nestled deep in the mountains, where the dense forest seemed to stretch on forever, its towering trees casting long, menacing shadows over the narrow cobbled streets. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stand still, where stories were passed down like heirlooms, and the wind always carried whispers of things unseen. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the legend of the haunting song. Every night at midnight, the song would rise from the depths of the forest. Soft at first, like the gentle murmur of a breeze, it would swell and grow, filling the night air with a sorrowful, eerie melody. Those who heard it said the song was a siren call, pulling them toward the dark woods, until they were lost in its depths, never to return. No one who had followed the song had come back to tell the tale. "How can a song do that?" asked Eloise, a young woman with a thirst for adventure and a skeptical mind. She stood on the edge of the village, looking out toward the darkened woods, the fading light of dusk casting long shadows over the landscape. Beside her stood three of her closest friends: Marcus, with his wild, untamable hair and laugh that could always light up a room; Olivia, who carried a quiet strength in her eyes, always questioning the mysteries of life; and Julian, the quiet one, who never spoke much but whose eyes seemed to see things others could not. "Maybe it's not the song itself," Olivia said, her voice low but steady. "Maybe it's the thing behind it, something that's using it to trap people." "Isn't it a little late to be theorizing?" Marcus teased, his grin wide and carefree. "We're about to walk into the heart of the forest that's supposed to be haunted by this monster. Maybe we'll even get to hear the famous song for ourselves." Eloise gave him a sharp look, but it was half amused. "We're going to prove there's nothing supernatural about this. I bet it's all just folklore like everything else around here." The group gathered their supplies, each of them carrying a lantern or flashlight to pierce the suffocating darkness of the woods. It was a night like any other, but to them, it felt as though the air had shifted, becoming thicker, heavier. The village behind them was a memory, its faint lights just a speck in the distance. Ahead lay the forest, its outline dark and ominous under the moon's pale gaze. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to grow taller, the branches twisting and turning like the fingers of some forgotten god. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the sound of their footsteps on the leaf-strewn ground. The further they walked, the more the air around them seemed to grow colder, biting at their skin despite the warmth of their coats. Then as they reached a clearing, the song began. At first, it was nothing but a soft hum like the wind brushing through the trees. But as it grew louder, it took on a form, melodic and sorrowful, the notes winding through the air like a delicate thread that tugged at the very soul. It was beautiful yet wrong. It filled them with a sense of longing, of yearning for something they couldn't name. "Do you hear that?" Julian's voice trembled. Eloise froze, her heart racing. "That's the song, but it can't be real. It's just some trick." But even as she spoke, she felt the pull. It wasn't physical, but it was there, a tug in her chest, urging her forward toward the sound. Without realizing it, her feet began moving, taking her closer to the edge of the forest. "Stop!" Marcus shouted, grabbing her arm, his face pale. "This is what we came to find, but we can't go any further." The others tried to stop, to reason with themselves. But the song wrapped around them, a silky, seductive force that whispered promises of answers, of discovery, of release. And then, from the darkness between the trees, they saw them. Ghostly figures, pale, translucent forms, their eyes hollow, their movements slow and unnatural. They floated just above the ground, their faces twisted in expressions of agony, as if they were trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment. Eloise's breath caught in her throat. What are they?" Olivia's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the song. "They're not ghosts. They're something else. Something that was never meant to walk the earth." A chill swept through the group, and suddenly the forest felt even darker, the trees pressing in around them. The song grew louder, more urgent, as if it was calling them. And then they realized, it wasn't the song that had power over them. It was the creature that lay hidden in the shadows, using the song to lure them closer. From the depths of the forest, a low growl echoed, sending a tremor through their bones. The trees seemed to shift, the air thick with the weight of something ancient, something malevolent. "We have to leave," Julian whispered, his voice barely audible. But it was too late. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the song reached a fever pitch, the notes twisting into something darker, more twisted. As if on cue, the figures began to move toward them, their limbs jerking in unnatural motions. The air around them thickened with the stench of decay, and the shadows seemed to grow, stretching like monstrous hands ready to pull them into the depths. Each of them froze, and it was then that they saw it, the creature standing just beyond the reach of the lantern's light. It was a grotesque figure, half human, half beast, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Its mouth stretched into a grotesque smile, and the song, it came from it. One by one, the friends were forced to confront something far more terrifying than the creature itself, a dark reflection of themselves. Their fears, their regrets, their deepest, most hidden insecurities manifested before them, forcing them to face the parts of themselves they had long buried. As the creature stepped forward, its song grew louder, more insistent. The choice was clear: survive or be consumed by the darkness. And in that moment, as they stood at the edge of the abyss, Eloise realized that the forest wasn't just a place of danger. It was a place of transformation, where every soul that entered was changed, forever. The question was no longer about escaping the forest. It was about surviving the monster inside. The song never stopped. Even as the grotesque creature stood before them, its eyes glowing like embers in the night, the melody continued to curl through the air, thick with the scent of death. Eloise's heart thundered in her chest, but her limbs refused to obey. It was as though the very atmosphere around them was alive, pushing them closer to the thing they most feared, pulling them toward the darkness of the forest. "Run!" Marcus screamed, but his voice barely reached them over the cacophony of the song. The words were drowned out, swallowed whole by the oppressive melody, which seeped into their minds like a poison. They couldn't move. None of them could. Eloise felt a shiver crawl down her spine as the creature stepped closer. Its form was both human and monstrous, a twisted parody of a man, its body hunched and covered in mottled, grayish skin. The mouth stretched too wide, exposing jagged teeth that gleamed with hunger. But it was the eyes, deep, pitiless voids as though the creature had no soul, that truly terrified her. It took another step forward, and in that instant something inside Eloise snapped. Her mind was suffocating under the weight of the song, the pull of the creature's presence suffusing her veins with fear. But deep within her, something else began to stir, a cold, terrible resolve. She wasn't going to die here, lost in this haunted place. Not like this. But as she tried to make a move, a horrifying realization crashed over her. The forest was alive. The trees, once towering and proud, now appeared to be leaning toward them, their bark twisting into grotesque faces, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. "Get out of here!" Olivia cried out, her voice raw with panic. "It's not just the creature, it's everything here." Eloise turned to her, her breath ragged. "We can't just run. We need to figure out what's happening here. Why is it doing this to us?" Before Olivia could respond, a chilling laugh echoed from behind them, soft at first but growing louder, more mocking. The creature's head tilted, a grotesque smile spreading across its face as if it understood their thoughts, as if it had been waiting for them to ask the right question. And then the song changed. It shifted, growing darker, more distorted. It was no longer a sweet, haunting melody, but a twisted dirge, a lament for something lost, something ancient. Eloise's vision began to blur, the edges of reality fraying. Her thoughts spiraled as the creature moved again, gliding through the air as though it were weightless. It stopped just in front of her, its breath fetid and cold. "You should not have come," it whispered, its voice raspy and guttural, like the sound of 1,000 voices speaking as one. "You trespass where only the damned belong." A wave of dread washed over Eloise, almost choking her. Her legs shook, but she fought the instinct to flee. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice unsteady but defiant. "I am the song," the creature replied, its grin widening impossibly. "I am the one who lures, the one who devours. I am the memory of the forest, the curse of the mountains. I am everything you fear and everything you cannot escape." Eloise stumbled backward, her heart racing. The ground beneath her feet trembled, the earth shifting as though the forest itself were alive, reacting to the creature's presence. Marcus, his face pale, grabbed her arm. "We need to get out of here. Now." But the creature's laughter grew louder, and suddenly the trees around them began to move. The shadows deepened, swallowing the path back to the village. The forest had closed in around them. "This forest is no mere collection of trees," the creature continued, its voice vibrating through their bones. "It is a prison, and I am its warden. For centuries I have waited, calling to the lost souls, feeding on the fear, the despair of those who wander into my domain." Eloise's pulse hammered in her ears as the creature's words sank into her mind. She thought of the village, of the people who had vanished over the years, their lives snuffed out without a trace. Were they lost to the forest as well, lured by the same song? Were they now part of the creature's eternal feast? But there was something else. Beneath the terror, beneath the overwhelming sense of dread, a question lingered in her mind. "You said you were the song," she whispered. "But how?" The creature's eyes glinted with malice. "I was once a man long ago before the forest claimed me. My voice was my gift, and in my arrogance, I used it to call forth the lost, to bring them into the woods where I could feed. But I was foolish. The forest, in its hunger, took me as it takes all who enter. Now I am its servant and its prisoner, bound to this place, to the song that will never stop. And now, you are mine." As the words hit her like a physical blow, Eloise felt the ground beneath her feet give way. The earth cracked, a jagged fissure opening before her. From the depths of the darkness below, she could feel something stirring, something ancient and hungry. Suddenly she felt herself being pulled. Not by the creature but by the song. It wrapped around her like a rope, tightening with every heartbeat, urging her toward the yawning abyss in the ground. "And oh," she cried, struggling to break free, but it was useless. The pull was too strong, the song too powerful. "Help me," she screamed, turning to her friends. But Marcus, Olivia, and Julian were frozen in place, their eyes wide with terror, their bodies trembling. As Eloise was dragged closer to the dark void, the last thing she saw before the world faded away was the creature's grotesque grin, stretching wider still, as though it were savoring her impending doom. Then the song took her. The air was thick with the smell of decay, the weight of the forest's ancient curse pressing down on them. Eloise awoke to find herself in a place beyond the world she knew, an endless void, suspended between the realms of the living and the dead. She was no longer in the forest, nor was she truly anywhere at all. Around her, the shadows writhed, whispering her name, calling her back to the song. The edges of her vision were distorted, as though reality itself were warping. But then she saw them. Figures, emerging from the darkness, their forms twisted and incomplete, as though they had been torn from the fabric of the world. Faces she did not recognize, but in their eyes, she saw the same fear she had felt before the song had taken her. The lost souls. Each one of them had been drawn into the forest by the same lure, the same haunting melody. And now they were trapped here forever. Bound by the curse, doomed to exist in this limbo for all eternity. Eloise's breath caught in her throat. She was not alone. And worse, she was not free. She could still hear the song in the distance, its notes echoing through the void, tugging at her very soul. And as she stood there, facing the lost souls of those who had come before her, Eloise realized one terrible truth. The creature hadn't just taken her. It had shown her the truth. The forest was a prison. And it was hungry. Eloise's breath came in shallow gasps as she stood among the lost souls, her body frozen in a state of suspended terror. The void around her pulsated with the rhythm of the song, an otherworldly hum that vibrated deep within her bones. The air was thick with the scent of rot and decay, as though she had stepped into a realm where time itself had died. She could see the lost souls now, their forms flickering in and out of existence, as if they were caught between the moments of life and death. Their faces were contorted in agony, mouths open in silent screams. Some of them were twisted, their bodies distorted by whatever horror had claimed them. But others looked strangely familiar. Their eyes were wide with fear, pleading for release, for an escape from the endless cycle that had bound them here. Eloise wanted to scream, wanted to call out to them, but the song was everywhere. It was in her mind, her soul, wrapping its tendrils around her like a chain, pulling her deeper into the darkness. The faces of the lost souls began to blur as her thoughts grew heavy, her mind fogging over under the weight of the melody. She could feel herself slipping away, losing touch with the world she knew. But then a hand reached out and grabbed her wrist. "Don't listen to it," a voice rasped, low and desperate. Eloise spun around, her heart racing. Standing before her was a man, his body gaunt and hollow, as though his very life had been drained away. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were hollow voids, blackened with terror. The man's hand trembled as he clutched hers, his fingers cold as death itself. Who are you?" Eloise whispered, her voice trembling. The man's lips curled into a faint, tortured smile. "I was once like you," he said. "I came into the forest, drawn by the song. And now I am one of them." Eloise's stomach churned. You're trapped here?" "Trapped." The man nodded grimly. "We all are. All the ones who heard the song, who let it into their souls. It's the price you pay for listening. For staying too long." Eloise's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced around at the lost souls. They were all staring at her now, their eyes filled with a mix of hopelessness and anger. Some of them reached out with gnarled, trembling hands, their mouths agape as if trying to warn her, but no sound came from them. Just the song. I didn't mean to, Eloise muttered, feeling the weight of the creature's curse closing in on her. I just wanted to know the truth. Why is it doing this? Why is it trapping us here? The man's expression darkened, and he glanced nervously over his shoulder, as though the song itself could hear them. The creature is the forest, and the forest is the creature. It is an ancient being, cursed long ago. It feeds on the lost, the broken. It uses the song to lure people into its grasp, to devour their souls and keep them here. Forever. Eloise felt a cold dread seep into her very soul. So what happens to us? Are we going to be stuck here too? Yes. The man's eyes were filled with a deep sorrow. Unless you find a way out. Unless you find the heart of the forest. The heart of the forest? Eloise repeated, her voice hoarse. Where is it? How do I find it? The man looked at her with hollow eyes, his voice trembling. It's not something you can just find. It's hidden, buried deep in the darkest part of the forest. Only the ones who truly understand the song can find it. And even then, it's a place where only death can lead you. Eloise's mind raced as the song continued its relentless pull. She could feel her own thoughts becoming distant, her will slipping away. The air around her seemed to grow colder, more oppressive, as if the very fabric of the world was fraying at the edges. The man's grip on her wrist tightened as he leaned closer, his breath foul with the stench of death. You must be strong, he said, his voice urgent. Do not let the song take you completely. If you can resist, if you can reach the heart of the forest, you may be able to destroy the creature. But you must hurry. If you wait too long, you will become part of the song. And you'll never leave. Eloise swallowed hard, her mind reeling. She didn't understand everything he was saying, but the terror in his eyes was enough to tell her one thing. If she didn't act soon, she would never leave this place. She would be consumed by the creature and trapped for eternity with the lost souls. But how could she possibly escape? The forest was vast, and the creature's song had already taken hold of her mind. She could feel herself slipping, her thoughts muddled and fragmented. The song was starting to drown out everything else. It was pulling her into its depths, like a drowning man clutching at the ocean's waves. But then something inside her stirred. It was faint, but it was there, a flicker of resistance. A glimmer of clarity amid the chaos. She could still fight it. She had to. The man's grip tightened once more, as though he could sense her determination. You have to be strong, he repeated, his voice shaking. Do not let it consume you. Eloise nodded, her hands trembling as she gripped his wrist. She wasn't sure how long she could hold on, but she had to try. She had to find the heart of the forest, the source of the song. The key to breaking the curse. With one last look at the man, Eloise turned and began to walk deeper into the void, her heart pounding with each step. The lost souls continued to stare at her, their eyes filled with a mix of longing and despair. The song was still there, echoing in her ears, pulling her closer to the darkness. But she was no longer afraid. She was determined. The creature would not have her. Not yet. Not ever. As she moved forward, the shadows seemed to part for her, as if the very forest was testing her resolve. She could feel the weight of its gaze upon her, the pressure of its hunger closing in. But Eloise kept walking step by step, determined to find the heart of the forest. And then she heard it. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the depths of the void. The song faltered briefly before returning stronger than ever. Eloise froze. The creature was coming. And this time it wasn't just the song that would claim her. Eloise's pulse hammered in her ears, drowning out the melody that had haunted her every step since she entered this cursed realm. The growl, deep and rumbling, came again, reverberating through the air, shaking the very ground beneath her feet. The creatures, the souls, the shadows, they were all watching. And the song, once a distant whisper, now consumed every inch of the forest, like a living thing, breathing and pulsing with an insidious hunger. She stumbled forward, the cold air biting at her skin as if the forest itself were trying to claw her back into its embrace. The growl was closer now, echoing off the trees in low, guttural waves. Each step she took seemed to bring her deeper into the heart of this nightmare, where the forest thickened, and the trees twisted, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands, eager to drag her into the shadows. A sharp cry pierced the air, a sound so horrifically human it made her blood run cold. She spun around, eyes wide, searching for the source of the sound. But all she could see were the trees, their twisted limbs groaning under the weight of something unseen. There was no one. Nothing. Just the deepening darkness, the suffocating silence between the growls and the song. The forest had a life of its own, an intelligence that watched her every move. Eloise could feel it closing in on her, as though it were aware of her fear, feeding off it. Her breath came faster, her chest tightening with panic. Why can't I see it? The thought echoed in her mind as the song continued to warp, shifting in tone, growing more insistent, more demanding. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted, crumbling away as though the earth itself was alive, hungry. Eloise stumbled forward, her hands outstretched for something to grasp, anything to keep her upright. She caught the edge of a twisted tree branch, and with a sharp tug, pulled herself back onto solid ground. The growl came again, much louder now, a deafening roar that sent vibrations through the air. Eloise's heart skipped a beat as the ground before her erupted in a spray of dirt and leaves. From the earth, a massive shape began to emerge, a form so immense and horrific that Eloise's breath caught in her throat. It was not a creature, not a monster in the traditional sense. It was the forest itself. A towering, grotesque amalgamation of trees and shadows, its limbs like massive roots, twisting and writhing with the power of something ancient, something eldritch. Its eyes, glowing red and malevolent, were fixed on her with an intelligence that sent a chill down her spine. The growl reverberated through her very soul, shaking her to the core. She tried to step back, but her legs felt like lead, as though the very ground was pulling her forward. The creature's eyes bore into her, its mouth opening in a wide, jagged grin, a grin that seemed to stretch impossibly wide, filled with rows of serrated teeth. Its voice was not a roar but a whisper, a low and ominous hum that wrapped around her like a vice. "You've come," the voice said, its tone rich with ancient malice. "So eager to understand. To seek the truth. But truth comes at a cost, little girl. And you've already paid." The song began again, louder now, a cacophony of maddening melodies that filled her mind and twisted her thoughts. Eloise clutched her head, her knees shaking as the song reverberated through her skull. Her hands trembled as she fought to keep her thoughts clear. "No," she whispered, her voice weak but defiant. "I won't listen. I won't be part of it." The creature's grin widened, its form shifting as it began to move, its twisted roots lashing out with terrifying speed. Eloise gasped and stepped back, her pulse racing as she turned to flee. But as she did, she saw it, a faint light in the distance. It was small, barely visible through the trees, but it pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly glow. The heart of the forest. With a surge of adrenaline, Eloise pushed herself forward, running through the thick underbrush, the ground shifting beneath her feet. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches grasping at her clothes, their roots tugging at her ankles, trying to hold her in place. But she would not stop. She couldn't. The light grew brighter, the song growing fainter as she neared it. The creature's growls became distant, replaced by the sound of rushing water, the faint crackle of flames. Eloise's breath came in ragged bursts as she reached the clearing. What she saw there stopped her dead in her tracks. A massive stone altar stood at the center of the clearing, surrounded by thick black vines that writhed like serpents. Atop the altar lay a crystal, glowing faintly with a pale blue light. It pulsed rhythmically as though it were alive. The air around it shimmered with an unnatural energy, and the song, though still faint, seemed to originate from this very place. Eloise's gaze shifted upward to the towering trees surrounding the clearing. They were unlike anything she had seen before, monolithic and ancient, their trunks covered in dark, pulsing veins. And between them, looming like a dark, oppressive presence, was the thing that had created the song. The creature. The forest itself. The ground beneath her feet trembled again as the roots of the trees began to shift, drawing closer. Eloise took a step forward, her breath catching in her throat as she felt the pull of the song once again. The crystal called to her, its light now almost blinding in its intensity. She knew what she had to do. She had to destroy the heart of the forest. The crystal was the source of the creature's power, its dark energy. It was what allowed the song to thrive, to pull people into its grasp, to trap their souls for eternity. But as she stepped forward, a voice, familiar and distorted, echoed in her mind. "Eloise." She froze. "You shouldn't do this." It was the voice of the man she had encountered in the void, the one who had warned her, who had told her about the curse. But this time his voice was different. It was twisted, pained, filled with despair. "You don't understand. It will consume you too. It will take you just like the rest of us." The ground trembled again and Eloise's heart skipped a beat. The air thickened and the song grew louder, its notes twisting into something far darker, more malevolent. She turned, her gaze searching for the source of the voice. The trees parted and there he stood. The man. But he was not the same. His body was twisted, his face distorted with agony, his eyes now black and empty. His hands reached out to her, trembling with a hunger she had never seen before. "You cannot stop it," he rasped, his voice a hollow whisper. "You cannot escape." Eloise's stomach turned, her resolve faltering. She stepped back, her hands trembling. The creature's power, its curse, was consuming everything. Would she too be lost to it? Would she become just another soul, wandering forever in the darkness? But the light, the crystal, it pulsed with her heartbeat. She could feel the truth of it in her chest, in her very soul. She had no choice. With a final desperate breath, Eloise rushed toward the altar, her hands outstretched toward the crystal, her heart pounding with fear and determination. She would break the curse, or die trying. The moment Eloise's fingertips brushed the cold surface of the crystal, a surge of energy coursed through her, more violent than she had ever imagined. It felt as though her very essence was being torn apart, as if every cell in her body was being stretched to its limit. The light from the crystal grew blinding, pulsing with an unholy rhythm, its glow deepening into a sickly shade of violet, filling the clearing with an oppressive, suffocating atmosphere. The song that had once seemed distant was now a maddening cacophony, reverberating inside her skull louder and louder, until she thought her mind would shatter. She stumbled backward, the weight of the curse crashing into her like a tidal wave. The creature, the forest itself, seemed to groan in fury, its roots thrashing and writhing beneath the earth as if trying to pull her back into its depths. The voice of the man, now unrecognizable, consumed by darkness, whispered through the void. It was the same warning he had given her in the clearing, in the space between time and reality. "You cannot win. It is too late. You have no hope." Her breath caught in her throat, her chest tightening. The air was thick with despair and her vision blurred. For a moment she doubted herself. Could she really destroy it? Could she really stop it? But then something deep inside her stirred, a memory, a flash of clarity. She thought of her friends, of the bond they shared, of the reasons they had ventured into this hellish forest. They had come together, united in their purpose. And she would not let them suffer, not like this. She would not let their deaths be in vain. With a strength she did not know she possessed, Eloise closed her eyes and pressed her palms flat against the crystal. A sickening crack echoed through the forest as the veins in the stone pulsed violently, and the song turned into a horrid screech, like the wail of 1,000 tortured souls. Then the ground beneath her feet trembled. The roots of the trees began to thrash violently, the earth beneath her opening in great rifts, as though the forest itself was dying, trying to escape its own inevitable destruction. The man, the shadow that had once been a warning, began to scream, his body contorting in agony. His eyes were wide with terror, his limbs jerking uncontrollably as the curse's full power began to unravel. The creature, the malevolent entity that had ruled over this forsaken place for centuries, began to writhe, its massive form shifting and pulsing, its eyes burning with rage. "No!" the shadow man howled, but his voice was weak, drained, filled with hopelessness. "You cannot destroy it. You do not understand." Eloise's mind flashed back to her first encounter with him, to the tortured whispers in the dark. What had he meant by that? She had seen the fear in his eyes, the way his form had flickered like an illusion, like a mere puppet being pulled by invisible strings. But now, standing before the heart of the curse, she understood the truth. This was not just a creature. It was not just a monster. It was a part of the forest, a sentient, malignant force that had taken on flesh and shadow. And it was dying. The crystal pulsed once more, brighter than before, sending a wave of searing light through the entire forest. The growls, the screeches, the song, all of it ceased, leaving only the deafening silence of death in its wake. Eloise's ears rang with the absence of sound, the unnatural stillness stretching on, impossibly heavy. Then the trees began to wither. Their roots, once so alive and pulsating, started to crumble into dust. The veins that had covered the stone altar cracked and broke apart, dissolving into the earth like sand. The glowing violet light from the crystal dimmed, and as it did, the oppressive weight in the air lifted, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread, a memory of what had been. The man, if it could still be called a man, fell to his knees in the center of the clearing, his form flickering and distorting like a fading image in a mirror. His face twisted in agony, his mouth agape in a silent scream. The curse was finally breaking and he could feel it. His body was being torn apart by the force of the magic. His once human form seemed to melt into the shadows, a dark, hollow void where his being had been. With a final haunting cry, the Shadow Man vanished, leaving nothing behind but a faint wisp of smoke, which too quickly faded into nothingness. The clearing was silent, eerily so, as if the world itself had taken a collective breath. Eloise, still clutching the crystal, felt the weight of exhaustion crash into her. Her legs wobbled beneath her, and she collapsed to the ground, her body trembling from the strain of what she had just witnessed. Her mind swirled, the memory of the forest. The first rays of dawn broke through the thick canopy of the forest, casting pale streaks of light over the desolation that had once been a place of nightmare. The trees, which had stood tall and menacing just hours before, now appeared fragile, their bark cracked and splintered. The very earth beneath Eloise's hands felt softer, as if the weight of centuries had been lifted. The forest, though scarred, had begun to heal. Eloise slowly rose to her feet, her body weak and exhausted, but her heart full of relief. Her friends, all still alive, stumbled from the shadows of the woods, their faces pale, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had witnessed the entire destruction of the curse, each of them having seen the terrible creature, each of them having fought their own demons within the depths of their fear. Sophie was the first to reach her, her trembling hand gripping Eloise's shoulder. Did we really do it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loud might shatter the fragile peace they had found. Eloise nodded, her breath heavy. "Yes, we did it. It's over." A soft wind began to stir, rustling the leaves in a gentle, soothing rhythm, as though the forest itself was sighing in relief. The song, the haunting melody that had once lured them into the depths of despair, was gone, replaced by the sounds of nature returning to life. But it wasn't just the forest that had changed. Eloise could feel it deep within herself. Something inside her had shifted, something she couldn't quite name. A burden had been lifted not just from the forest, but from her soul as well. The darkness, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it had been swept away by the crystal's light, by the breaking of the curse. They walked slowly, quietly back to the village. The journey seemed shorter, as if the land itself had become less oppressive, less alive with menace. It was a strange feeling, like walking through a dream. The villagers, who had once feared the forest and its horrors, now stood in awe as they looked upon the group of survivors. The curse had been lifted. The creature was no more. And for the first time in generations, the village could breathe again. Later that evening, as the last light of the sun dipped below the horizon, Eloise stood on the edge of the village, gazing at the forest. It was no longer the dark, terrifying place it had once been. The trees stood tall, the leaves rustled in the wind, and the night was quiet, peaceful. It was as if the forest itself had been reborn, purged of its ancient evil. Her thoughts drifted back to the Shadow Man, to the warnings he had given her. He had been right about one thing. This curse, this forest had not just been a physical terror. It had been a reflection of the darkness inside each of them. The fears, the regrets, the lost pieces of themselves, they had all been laid bare in that terrible place. But in confronting it, in breaking the curse, they had found a new strength, a new understanding of themselves. As the moon rose in the sky, casting its silver glow over the landscape, Eloise smiled faintly. The curse was broken, but she knew that the true test would come in the days and months ahead, when they would have to rebuild not just the village but their own lives. But that, she realized, was a challenge they would face together. The nightmare was over. The forest was free. And they were free. As the wind whispered through the trees, Eloise closed her eyes, feeling the peace that had once seemed impossible. She knew that the forest would always be a part of her now, but it no longer held the power to control her. She had faced the darkness and in doing so had emerged into the light. And so, the story ended. But remember, dear reader, this is just a tale, a story woven from the fabric of imagination. The forest may not be real, nor the horrors that dwelled within it. And the people you have come to know may not have ever walked upon this earth at all. Perhaps this is a tale told to pass the time, to entertain, or to warn. Or perhaps it is something more. But one thing is certain. The greatest darkness lies not in the forest but within ourselves. This is not a true story.